the meatball.
On top of spaghetti.
Zero mobility, zero brain power, all damage. The fabled Meatball Staff. Today we're running with a classic Wildfire build. Tome offhand, Hunter Hood, Cleric Robe, Soldier Boots, Gig Pots, Omelet, and Keeper Cape. The main idea with this build is to build up the cast speed bonus with passive 4 Tome and Omelet, so that we can mash Q1 super fast. The sustained DPS is crazy high, such that we should be able to kill anyone who's willing to stand near us before the Hunter, Gig, Cleric can run out. Soldier Boots, because even though Wanderlust has a super high cooldown, it has the best chase power for running down people who lose an initial trade, or for full running from something unwinnable. Default W is Flame Burst, always useful at the very least with its instant cast damage and optional mobility boost. The only real swap is to Firewall if the opponent is melee without Gig or CC immune mobility E. I'm about 600 spec in Fire Staffs, and I'm going to run with a tier 7 equivalent set in the Mist, to hopefully get some people willing to fight. Alright, let's go. First fight is against a one-handed spear. They dismount looking for a fight, and that's why I'm here, so I get out of melee and dismount as well. Make sure to eat your food before you enter the Mist. Not all opponents will give you time to eat food before, like this one. They start to stack their Q, and I open up with an instant cast W and E. They pop their Reflect W, but canceled it before the E hit them, now that the Meatball is reflectable anyway. Now that they are in their range, I pop Hunter Hood and start the Q spam. They use Inferno Shield, but as we can already see, the damage from this build is super high, and they try to run away. I pop Soldier Boots and use W on myself to catch up, making use of the long cooldown but unbeatable chase from Wanderlust. They Gig and Reflect when I catch up, but it's not enough to save them, and even procs my Keeper Cape, increasing the damage just enough that they go down to the Morgana mobs. They point out their wrong skill selection, which is true. Impale or Force of Spears as well as Q1 would have been much better for them. Up next, I'm against a Bolt Caster with double Merc Jacket and higher IP. I have Gig in case they land their silence, but my Cleric will only be able to prevent one of their Merc Jacket casts, so this is going to be tough. We both dismount, and I realize that I'm on Firewall, so I mount up again to keep space while I swap abilities. While running back to the fight, I inspect a tier 6 Claymore Rat lurking, and I'll need to keep that in mind. Fight starts with us trading Qs, and I use the fact that Bolt Caster stands still to hit a longer range Meatball. They kite back and then use the fact that I stand still to land their Silence W at longer range. They use my time Silence to pop Merc and nearly full channel their E, but Gig prevents me from dying. I pop Hunter Hood to reflect the end of the channel, where damage is the highest. They reset their Merc Jacket and go for another heal. I use Cleric Robe to prevent most of it and pop Boots to scamper away, while the Claymore Rat comes in to finish my job. After waiting out the fight, I pull the classic Mist move and pull a reverse Rat and come back for cleanup. My Gig and Cleric are still on cooldown, so I do need to be careful here. But instead, I just smash abilities and luckily have Cleric Robe up at the last second to finish off the Claymore. Up next is a fight against the tier 7 Battle Axe player, with a pretty meta combo of Fiend Cowl, Mist Jacket, and Mana Sprint with healing pots. I dismount, and then they dismount pretty close to me not too long after, so I think I can get some free casts in, but they still have their zone-in shield, so the fight starts fairly even. I instantly Hunter Hood, should have saved from when they had stacks of E, and Q spam while they wait out the defensive, saving their purge for my Cleric Robe. I land a W and E, and they use their jacket to immune the true damage dot from the Meatball, and the explosive imp actually dies to my E and explodes right on top of me. I waste Cleric Robe thinking they would start fighting again, but they simply wait out the duration, and after another exploding imp assist, I go down very quickly. Probably had them if I didn't troll 2 of the 3 defensives and get a third of my health taken by mobs. But they didn't even have to use Fiend Cowl, so it would have been close regardless. They were also a melee weapon without Gig, so taking Firewall would have been good here, forcing them to use Jacket to get through it, but I was a little too eager to fight and forgot to swap. Our next fight starts when I run into a Great Axe player, while meme chasing a Gatherer. They will likely try to pop their Merc before E, so I can hopefully get double value out of Cleric, but using it against Merc will be better value if I have to choose one. The fight starts with a bit of poke, and when they turn, I use Hunter Hood. After already seeing me pop Hunter Hood, they use E into it and take a large chunk of reflect damage. Thinking I can kill them right here, I use Cleric to get the extra boost with my Keeper Cape, but they just run away and I'm left having wasted a defensive. I use W to close some space, and I don't inspect the stag running by that'll come back to bite me in a short minute. My boots come off cooldown, and I use them to try to catch up before we both end up out of combat. I catch them with W and Q, and they turn with a Merc Hood, Gig, and E. With all of their AoE and my Meatball, the Rat is dismounted on both of us with low HP. And even though I get the kill on the Great Axe, I live for only about a quarter second after. Even though ratting was nerfed in the last patch, they're not literally useless, so beware. Up next is a tier 8 dual swords without Gig Pots. They dismount early and start moving toward me, and I move away to swap to Firewall. Even without gigs, Dual Sword is CC immune while in their E, so this was not a good swap. The fight starts with them Eing in, and I drop the Firewall, and they instantly gig. They had a gig swap in their inventory, and I didn't re-inspect to notice. I had insta-popped Hunter Hood and got in my E and W cast among the Q spam. My Cleric is purged by their helm, and I use my gig super late into the fight. I almost get them even after all these misplays with my second W, but their E is off cooldown now, letting them jump through for the kill. An Infinity Blade player shows up right at the end anyway and rats them, so I do end up with an assist. Aside from being more careful about the W swap, this is a fight where having OC available would have made the difference. So from here on, I will have 10 siphoned in my pocket. Up next is a high-spec tier 8 carving. I dismount right in front of them as we leave the camp, and already have a chance to use OC to even the playing field. After opening with W, I insta-cleric and begin Q spam. They purge the cleric and pop Inferno Shield. I use Retaliate and use Meatball, which is a non-reflectable, and they start to run with their low health bar. I waste Gig for absolutely no reason, as they're already running away, and then pop Wanderlust for the chase. I catch up with a self W and finish them off with a few more Qs. Thanks again to the increased miss density from the last patch, there is another rat. This time an Avafist, whose high mobility I am unlikely to be able to outrun, having already used my boots. I try to juke them around a tree to get a little bit more health regen time, but they assassin chew from off screen and I don't have enough health to fight back. Next fight is versus a Bolt Caster, this time with a Harvester Cap, who dismounts ahead of me while I'm hauling a Wisp. For this fight, I have Gig to mitigate their combo, and if I can predict their sleep cap, maybe even use an early Hunter Hood. We start by poking each other with Q, and the Meatball brings them into Keeper Cape while they walk towards me, so I know the sleep cap is coming and use Retaliate early. They opt for Q instead of E, and I Gig anyway. My Keeper gets activated and they pop Cleric and Boots to try to run, and I match with my Boots. After finally catching them, they turn to Silence Shot, but I react with Cleric Robe, and their E does no damage in turn. They make a last-ditch attempt to run and use OC to deny me the loot as I take them down. Up next is an Abbey fight against the Badon. A tough matchup for this build, as Badon E interrupts all spells casted while under its debuff, even if you cast really fast. They also have a Cultist Cowl, which would be very dangerous if I continue to Q spam while it is on me. Fight starts with them running through the mobs to get a long-range E hit. I walk away since I can't fight while debuffed, and instantly pop Hunter Hood when we're both in range to fight. They kind of just stand there and take the Q spam and only run when I use Cleric Robe. I boots for the chase and hit the longest, slowest Meatball ever for the kill. No time for celebration though, as a recently buffed Frost Staff player appears. After running into the corner, I am blessed by the 3D terrain and they miss their Purity Cowl, so I'm still out of combat and regenerating health. They nearly catch up with their W and tickle my butt with a Q, and with all my abilities nearly off CD, I pop OC and turn for the fight. I insta Hunter Hood and get a few Qs cast off before they use Assassin Jacket. They reappear with a Q and interrupt my Q with their Cowl. And then they continue the classic Frost gameplay of Kite. I start to move the other direction, forcing them to choose between their mobility to move in or to let me full reset again, and they choose to W in. I hit them with a W and an E and resume the Q spam as they run away, even though they're in their Abbey buff while I have none. I sidestep a few Qs and their Cowl, and manage to get a few Q casts off, but the mobility on Frost cannot be matched with this build, and I'm left outspaced again. Rather than redoing what already worked before, I choose to walk straight at them and completely waste my Cleric, popping it when they were not even fighting. I follow with the Hunter Hood, and after a Q and W, they invis, and I throw the Meatball, hoping for a hit, just narrowly losing due to the Cleric misplay right at the end. Next fight is against another Badon, this time a tier lower. They're in the middle of the camp, and I want to draw them out, so I aggro a mob to make them think they'll have the advantage. They take the bait and instantly boots out towards me, and open with a Royal Helm plus E. As soon as I'm not stunned, I Cleric to stop the cast interrupt and start the Q spam. They W away, but having already used boots, need a Jacket to stop me from hitting them. After dropping W on them, I walk away. Having no mobility left to catch, I need them to come to me if I want to kill. They think that our even health means even odds and come back for round 2, but they walk straight into a Meatball and whiff their Helm stun and go down very fast. Up next is a dual sword who lets me dismount them. I Hunter Hood as soon as they're dismounted, and they E very predictably. They use Hunter Hood and I Gig to mitigate the reflect. I use Cleric as soon as Keeper Cape procs for the extra damage bonus, and Meatball with the 2 stacked buffs. In true dual sword fashion, they still do a huge chunk of my health, even after a near perfect execution on my part, but the 1 tier IP advantage wins the brawl. Up next, just a moment later, is a fight with a life curse. We dismount at nearly the same time, and I OC to reduce the IP gap. They instantly Inferno Shield, and I answer with Hunter Hood and no Gig, taking a large amount of reflect damage. I use Cleric after my Keeper is already down, and they E to purge it, and I go down with their sustained damage. To be completely honest, at the time I thought they had a Curse Skull instead of a Life Curse, and was expecting Fear instead of Purge, hence the late Cleric. But the real misplay was not using Gig while still Q mashing the Reflect. Up next is a fight against yet another dual sword while carrying a core. Since we start unmounted at decent distance, I want to force them to use their E at long range, giving me time to react with Hunter Hood. The rest of the plan is to just Cleric their Merc. They pop a pre-engaged Wanderlust, and then still use their E from range, and I pop Reflect and Gig. They use both of their immunities early while kiting away, but their boots are now ended, and mine are just starting, so I easily catch up. After they E back in, they have no mobility left, and I meatball them at point blank to finish off with a few Qs. Up next is yet another Badon. They dismount on top of me, and I use this to bait them into using cooldowns to dismount. I pop OC and turn to get the fight started, and they move away. After catching a Q to the face and getting no closer, I W away, hoping to get their mobility used towards me, and they W in. I turn back with a meatball, and they instantly sidestep. I pop Wanderlust to full reset, since this Badon player obviously knows what they're doing and will not let me fight on my terms. I ain't no quitter though, so I dismount in front of them again to try round 2. They max range E me, following up with a cowl, interrupting all of my casts, while I'm still too far away to reasonably fight back. I get off a whole 2 Qs before they're out of range again, and I turn to once again reset. They W in, and I go for a W plus meatball, and they sidestep again, this time from a pretty close range too. Their constant need to space gets the better of them again though, and I pop Wanderlust again for another full reset. Okay, 3rd time's the charm. I'm hoping that they're finally frustrated enough that they'll stay closer to me and I can get them. This time I start by using W on myself to close some space and get a Q off before they E. I Cleric to prevent the interrupt and spam out a few more Qs before they W away. And now with their W and E both down, I boots aggressively to stay close, and then foolishly don't Gig for their Inferno Shield and take a chunk of Reflect. Their sprint away got the better of them for their 3rd time, and thanks to me missing a 3rd E on them, I get out of combat just in time to escape out the gate. Very hard to kill a properly spaced Badon player. Up next is a Warbow, with a classic invisibility plus force field combo for evasiveness. Fight starts with them letting me dismount them with just Qs, and I'm forced to use an early boots if I want to have any chance at catching them. They use their boots, but it gets them no additional space, just a few seconds of time. They E, and I react with Hunter Hood. As they move in to get a force push, they are an easy target for the meatball, and 1 more Q stack is enough dots to kill them in their assassin jacket. As I'm looting, another bow player, this time a longbow, thinks I must have no cooldowns left or something, and sprints in after dismounting off screen, and burns their W to dismount me. I Cleric their E as I get dismounted, and they Cleric against my Q split. They root me with their W and start making space, and I throw a troll meatball, but they stop for a Q cast and end up getting hit at long range. They start to really run and I boots to catch up. They almost get me with another W root into E, but I Gig to live and finish with a Q. This fight was way closer than it should have. My E was very dodgeable here, should have used it a lot closer, and I should have used Hunter Hood at the end to kill with Reflect for style points and to get some damage reduction instead of Gig. Up next is Dual Sword with a Cultist Cowl. Game plan is Cleric the Merc Jacket, Gig the Cultist, and Hunter Hood the E. They let me dismount them at distance, but they stay away and try to build up stacks before fighting. But I'm not falling for that, and the fight starts for real with no stacks. Fight starts with a Q and them using an E. I mid-cast, so I'm late on the Reflect, and I immediately forget the game plan and Gig before Cultist. When they do Cultist, I use Cleric, hoping I can kill through Merc Jacket after. Luckily, they choke and use Merc Jacket W before my cleric is over. They try to escape with their demon boots, but my Q dots boosted by Keeper Cape take them down. As I run up to get my loot, in comes a tier 6 longbow to rat. My boots are still at stacks, so I don't get hit and can space enough to get my health fully regenerated. I turn and hit them with the W and 1Q before they assassin jacket. I start moving back towards the loot, and they reveal with an E that feels a little bullshit that it hits me. They move in, and another W plus 1Q brings them down to about half health, and they leave while I pick up the loot. Next fight is against a bolt caster with a guardian helm. I dismount near them, hoping they'll want to fight, and they just stand near me, which I think means they want to fight. It turns out they were actually just typing. After dismounting, they move away, and I think I'll have a chase for real, but they boots in, and I pop retaliate before Q spam. They follow up their first Q with a guardian and cleric into their E, which brings me into Keeper Cape. I cleric to stack the damage bonus and drop W and Meatball, and they go down real fast. Up next is a light crossbow and knight armor. They run back into me with low health on a mount for a fight to start, and I gig as soon as they're dismounted, knowing light crossbow is going to dump a full rotation with its low cooldowns. I pop retaliate, and they purge with knight armor, but my gig prevents me from being knocked, and I keep the Q spam up. They pop boots and heal pot as I pop cleric, and they waste some of the sprint time hitting me, and at this point it's just one or less for the chase. Last fight of the video starts against the Navafist. They lurk around before letting me dismount, and I immediately move away to get them to use mobility after me, and then pop OC once they're close. But they immediately start to run, not willing to take a fight on even IP. After a short bit of chase, we get to the second opponent, a Tomb Hammer with Hellfire pots. They boots at me and catch with an E plus pot combo. I use retaliate and gig as soon as I can and start the Q spam, going just about even on health. I pop self W and boots to try to chase, and they stop me with another E and pot. This is when the Avafist shows back up, and after catching up to the Tomb Hammer, they hit me with a Merc Hood, keeping me slow enough for the Avafist to have an easy choice for who to target. The damage from this build is crazy, but defensive usage does need to be on point for it to not be super squishy. Don't be like me and overlap and waste defensives. But even if you do, it's pretty easy to see success with the build. Even with the increased rat activity from the more packed mist, I'm up on silver from the past few days. Make sure to leave a comment with IGN and your in-game name, along with server, to join the giveaway. Back to weekly uploads, so only one 7-day code for now, unless we get over 100 comments, in which case I'll bump it up to 3 codes. Make sure to like the video if you liked it, and subscribe if you want to see more of these in the future. Catch you next time.